Did you do something to me last night?" The words slithered off Rose's tongue like venom, her tone sharp, loaded with disgust. Not confusion, not fear, pure accusation. Victor Harris stood at the threshold of the conference room, coffee in hand, the aroma of dark roast clashing harshly with the staleness in the air. He scanned the room quickly. HR Director Miss Carter, two stone-faced corporate attorneys, and Rose Holloway, the 20-year-old intern he had once considered vulnerable. Now, she looked like a loaded weapon. "Answer me, Victor," she spat, stepping forward, brandishing her phone like evidence at a trial. "Is that your signature move? Wait until they're drunk enough not to fight back?" He said nothing. Not because he had no defense, but because rage, when unspoken, was sharper. His face didn't twitch. His hands didn't shake. That's what frightened them the most, this control. Rose thrust the screen into the center of the table. "That's me. Alone. In my bed. After your little Boy Scout routine. You touched me, didn't you?" Victor didn't blink. "No, I didn't." "Right," she scoffed. "You just happened to escort me home, bring me inside. And the next thing I know, there's a photo I didn't take and memories I don't have. Sounds convenient. For you." Miss Carter raised both hands, palms open. "Let's stay civil." "No," Rose snapped, eyes burning. "You all love him because he checks every box. Veteran, single dad, well-dressed. He smiles in the elevator and holds the damn door open. But none of you see what's underneath." Victor's jaw clenched. His voice came slow and steady. "What exactly do you think is underneath, Rose?" Her lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Exactly what they warned me about when I started here." The room dropped 10 degrees. Victor set down his coffee. "Are you calling me dangerous because of who I am or because of what I didn't do? You think you're untouchable because you play the perfect employee," she hissed. "But you're not. I saw it in your eyes when you helped me, like you were owed something for being the good guy." "That's a lie," he said quietly. "It's my word against yours," she replied coldly, arms folded. "And we both know whose voice this company trusts more." Victor stared at her, seeing it now for what it was. Not fear, not trauma, strategy. Somewhere behind that fury was a motive, and it wasn't justice. Miss Carter broke the silence. "Victor, as this matter escalates, we'll need your cooperation. Effective immediately, you're on leave, with pay, pending the outcome of our review." He nodded once, slowly, suspended for something I didn't do. Again, he turned toward the door. "You're not the victim here," Rose shouted behind him. "Stop pretending this is about race." Victor turned back, just enough to meet her glare. "It's not about pretending, it's about surviving." He left the room, the door clicked shut like a verdict. As he walked down the corridor, stares followed him, some curious, some cautious. He walked past his desk. Computer dark, badge access dead, systems locked. Identity erased before the meeting even began. He thought of Maya, 6 years old, waiting for pancakes, asking why Daddy looked so serious this morning. He told her nothing was wrong. He lied. Outside, the sun burned cold against the glass towers of Atlanta. Victor's phone buzzed. A text from Amanda Rodriguez. "We need to meet. Today." He didn't smile. He didn't flinch. He simply whispered, "Let them come." If you've ever been falsely accused, ignored when telling the truth, or judged just by the way you look, share your story in the comments so others can listen and empathize. Because someone near you might be living the same story, quietly, every single day. Victor sat in his parked car, engine running but motionless, staring blankly at the steering wheel. The HR meeting played on a loop in his head. Rose's voice like gravel, her venom still clinging to the lining of his ears. That photo, that look in her eyes. It wasn't fear. It was something colder, something planned. The text from Amanda blinked on his phone again. "We need to meet. Today." He put the car in gear and drove. Amanda Rodriguez's office was tucked between a barber shop and a laundromat on the south side. It was unassuming, like her. No marble floors, no assistants at the front desk, just a woman who'd fought too many quiet battles for people who rarely got to speak. Victor had met her once years ago at a community event for veterans wrongfully terminated. Back then, he didn't think he'd need her. Now, she was the only call that made sense. When he entered, Amanda didn't smile. She studied him over her glasses, nodded toward the seat. "You brought it?" Victor handed her the flash drive. She plugged it into her laptop, and silence filled the room as she clicked through folders. "You've been recording meetings," she said, not a question. "Not all, just the ones that matter." "Smart." She clicked on a file labeled Holiday Party. Audio. Voices filtered through the speakers. Laughter, clinking glasses, someone saying, "You need a ride?" Then Victor's voice, then Rose's, slurred, barely coherent. "You sure?" he asked in the recording. "Yes, yes, home, please. You're nice." Then static, then nothing. Amanda leaned back. "This doesn't prove innocence, but it casts doubt. That's a start." Victor said nothing. His hands rested on his knees, knuckles pale. "There's more," he said quietly. "She lied, and not just about that night." Amanda raised an eyebrow. Victor opened his phone and pulled up a screenshot internal access log from the company's system. "Last week, Rose accessed restricted documents or client migration reports. She's not even cleared for that level of data. I flagged it. No one responded." "And now she accuses you of misconduct," Amanda murmured. "That's a hell of a distraction." "She's hiding something," Victor said. "She's not scared. She's calculating. This isn't about what happened. It's about what I might expose." Amanda nodded slowly, her fingers already drafting an outline. "We need to shift this, not defense offense. We push for an audit. If your access logs are clean and hers aren't, we widen the lens." "They've already made up their minds," Victor said. "HR froze my account before they even heard me speak. My badge doesn't work. They're preparing to bury me." "Then we make it hard to bury," Amanda said. "We make noise." She handed him back the flash drive. "And Victor, one more thing. From here on, don't go back there alone. If they call you in, I go with you." He nodded. He knew better than to argue. That night, he sat on the edge of Mia's bed, watching her sleep, her tiny chest rising and falling in rhythm with the lullaby humming from the nightlight turtle on her dresser. Her innocence was the only thing left untouched by the storm. He reached out, brushing a curl off her forehead. She stirred, then smiled in her sleep. "Night, Daddy," she murmured. "Night, baby girl," he whispered back, voice breaking. Downstairs, he opened his laptop. The company's public access portal still let him log in as a guest. Enough to browse the org chart, news board, and one section that made his stomach drop. Employee wellness and community feedback. There it was, anonymous postings, whispers, half-truths, and Rose's story had taken root. A post. "Intern speaks out, abuse of power still alive." Another. "Disappointed. Thought we were better than this." No names, no facts, just narrative. Victor typed, then erased, then typed again. Not a defense, not a denial, just one sentence. The truth always sounds like an excuse to people who prefer the lie. He closed the laptop and sat in silence. The next morning, Amanda called early. "A journalist wants to speak. Local outlet. You okay with that?" "Not yet," Victor said. "Not until I know what she's really hiding." "Then we find out," she replied. He drove to the office building, not to enter, just to watch. From the parking lot, he saw Rose arrive, sunglasses on, phone glued to her hand. She laughed with someone from marketing, carefree. No sign of a victim, no trace of fear, just strategy in motion. Back in his car, Victor scrolled through the internal employee directory he'd downloaded weeks ago as backup. Rose's listed supervisor, Ken Mallory, VP of Data Integration. The same man who'd once joked at the office party, "We need more people like Rose, less risk, more polish." Victor remembered that sentence because of the way Ken's eyes had flicked to him when he said it. More polish, meaning less, him. Amanda texted, "Check your email. I pulled Rose's access log. You were right. She downloaded a secure client list 2 days before the accusation." Victor's stomach sank, then settled. Pieces were falling into place. Rose hadn't made a mistake. She had made a trade. Blame him, silence, scrutiny climbed the ladder. It was all a play. And this time, he wasn't playing along. He called Amanda back. "Set the meeting. I'm ready to talk." And this time, the story's mine to tell. Victor sat across from Ken Mallory, the VP of Data Integration, in a glass-walled conference room that reeked of power and controlled lighting. The kind of room designed to intimidate without ever raising its voice. Amanda Rodriguez sat beside him, her hands folded neatly over a leather folder, her expression unreadable. Ken glanced at his watch and exhaled like someone forced to entertain a trivial inconvenience. "Victor," he said smoothly, "I don't know what this is about, but I'm giving you 10 minutes. After that, I have a board sync." Victor met his eyes. "I won't need that long." Amanda leaned forward. "We're here to inform you of a potential breach of company protocol. We have reason to believe that Miss Rose Holloway accessed confidential files outside of her clearance, and that a fabricated accusation was used to preempt exposure." Ken's expression didn't change, but a slight muscle in his jaw flexed. "That's a serious allegation." "So is rape," Victor said flatly. The words hung in the air. Amanda slid a printed report across the table. "That's a screenshot from your internal system logs. It shows Rose downloading migration data flagged confidential, time-stamped 2 days before she accused Victor of misconduct." Ken didn't reach for the paper. "You realize this is a legal matter now. HR will handle this." "HR is compromised," Amanda replied. "They've taken action against my client without evidence. Meanwhile, this document indicates internal fraud and possible corporate espionage." Ken exhaled through his nose. "You don't bring this to me. You bring it to compliance." "We did," Amanda said. "They never responded." Victor folded his hands. "We came to you, Ken, because you're her supervisor. And because your name shows up on the internal messages she forwarded that data to." Ken's poker face cracked, just slightly, a blink too long. A twitch at the corner of his mouth. "What are you insinuating?" "That you gave her access," Victor said. "And when you realized she got sloppy, you needed a distraction, and I walked right into it." Amanda pulled out a second document. "Here's a metadata trail from an anonymized server in Delaware. Rose's company login was used to send client migration data to an encrypted address. That data was monetized. We traced the recipient to a known competitor, Tarnex Systems." "This is insane," Ken muttered. "You're building a conspiracy theory out of circumstantial logs and emotional paranoia." "No," Amanda said. "We're exposing a pattern, one that's about to get very public, unless it's addressed internally." Ken stood abruptly. "This meeting is over. You can walk out," Victor said, rising. "But the data doesn't go away. Neither does the truth. And the next person we talk to wears a federal badge." Ken froze at the door. "You're bluffing." "Try me," Victor said. Ken hesitated, then walked out without another word. Amanda didn't smile. She didn't need to. "We've got him rattled." "But not done," Victor replied. "Not yet." They exited the building together. Outside, the air was thick, with late winter wind and low gray clouds. Victor's phone buzzed Mia's daycare. He answered quickly. "Mr. Harris?" "Mia's fine, but she was crying today. Said some kids told her daddy's in trouble." Victor closed his eyes. "Thank you. I'll talk to her." He hung up, jaw tight. Amanda looked over. "You okay?" "No," he said, "but I'm focused." That night, Victor sat on Mia's bed, her small hand in his. "You're not in trouble, right, Daddy?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "No, sweetheart. Someone told a lie about me. And now I have to prove it's not true." "Is it because you're brown?" she asked, staring at the ceiling. Victor blinked, stunned. "Who told you that?" "Nobody. But I hear things, and I see how people look at us sometimes." Victor exhaled slowly, heart twisting. "It's not fair, Mia. Some people believe bad things faster if the person looks like me. That's why we don't yell. We show, we prove, we stand." She nodded, then whispered, "I believe you." Victor kissed her forehead. "That's all I need." The next morning, a news article appeared. Local blogger. Title: "Corporate Whistleblower Suspended After Intern's Accusation." No names. But everyone at the company knew. Comments exploded. The usual bile. But also sympathy, doubt, questions. Amanda forwarded the link to the company's legal department. She attached one line: "This is your opportunity to fix it before it spreads." Meanwhile, Rose posted a vague quote on her personal page. "The truth is often silenced by powerful men, but I won't stop speaking." Underneath, hearts and clapping emojis flooded in. Victor didn't respond. He didn't need to. Amanda sent him the next step. "They've scheduled a board-level review. We're invited. Full presentation." Victor suited up that Friday morning like he was going to war. Same navy jacket from his deployment funeral detail. Same tie he wore when he got promoted last year. He looked in the mirror. then down at a photo of his late mother on the dresser. "You taught me how to stand," he whispered. "Time to do it." As he walked into the boardroom, all eyes turned. Some surprised he was still standing, others curious what he had. Amanda carried the files. Victor carried the truth. "Shall we begin?" he said. His voice didn't shake, his heart didn't race. This time, they would hear him, and they would not forget. Victor stood before the boardroom like a man on trial, yet not once did he waver. The long walnut table stretched before him, lined with executives in tailored suits and guarded expressions. Some looked bored, some unreadable, but a few he could tell were curious. Amanda sat to his left, calm and poised, a thick black folder in front of her. She didn't speak yet. This was Victor's moment. The CEO, a silver-haired man named Ellis Grant, gestured with his hand. "Mr. Harris, we've read the preliminary report, but I'd like to hear it in your own words." Victor nodded once. 3 weeks ago, I did what this company trained me to do: protect a colleague, act with integrity, and take initiative when others hesitated. I drove an intoxicated intern home. I did nothing wrong. I left her safe. I didn't touch her. I didn't linger. I didn't ask for anything. A murmur passed through the room, but no one interrupted. He continued. 2 days later, I was accused. No formal charges, no physical evidence, just a blurry photograph and a dangerous assumption. I was removed from my position, stripped of access, and treated like a liability before I could even speak. He paused, letting the silence stretch. But this isn't just about me. It's about what that accusation was designed to cover up. Amanda opened the folder. "Page 5, she instructed. The board members turned pages in sync. "You'll find a data log from your internal system. It shows Miss Rose Holloway accessed a restricted client file at 2:43 a.m., 2 days prior to her accusation. Data that, according to your compliance records, was later leaked to a competing firm." One of the women on the board, sharp-eyed and still as stone, leaned forward. "And you're saying this wasn't coincidence?" "No," Amanda replied. "It was diversion. Our client uncovered IP metadata linking the leak back to a VPN used by Miss Holloway. We also have Slack messages showing she discussed promotion opportunities tied to proving she could leverage inside info for influence." Another board member raised an eyebrow. "This is serious. Why didn't compliance catch this?" "Because they weren't looking," Victor said. "They were too busy trying to bury a scandal that hadn't even been proven." He scanned the room. What message does that send? That accusations, regardless of evidence, carry more weight than facts. That a man like me, who spent 10 years building a clean record, can be erased overnight without anyone asking a single question. Grant leaned back in his chair. "Mr. Harris, this is a complicated issue. We have to weigh risk, brand impact, employee safety." "You mean liability," Victor cut in. "What you're really weighing is optics. But let me remind you, every day you delay correcting this, every hour you let silence speak louder than truth, you're gambling with the reputation you claim to protect." Amanda pushed forward a second document. "We're not here to demand reinstatement. We're here to demand transparency. A formal review of internal access policies, a public statement acknowledging premature action, and a formal investigation into Miss Holloway's conduct and any internal collusion involved." "You think she had help?" the sharp-eyed woman asked. "We know she did," Amanda said. "Her supervisor, Ken Mallory, is tied directly to the logs. We believe he gave her the clearance she needed, and when it went sideways, they framed Victor to derail scrutiny." A long, tense pause filled the room. Finally, Grant spoke. "We'll need time to verify these claims." "You have 48 hours, Amanda replied. "After that, we go public." No one responded. Victor stood tall, not out of pride, but out of necessity. He had come too far to bend now. As they left the building, Amanda didn't say much until they were halfway to the parking lot. "You were flawless in there. Doesn't mean they'll do the right thing," he said. "Maybe not, but now they're accountable. You've taken this out of their shadows." That night, Victor sat with Mia on the living room floor, helping her build a Lego fire station. Her laughter was the only music he needed. "Daddy," she said, fitting a red block into place, "did you win today?" He thought about that for a long moment. "I didn't lose," he said. "Sometimes, that's the first step." She nodded solemnly, then handed him the next piece. "Let's build the roof, so it doesn't fall apart." Out of the mouths of babes, he thought. He kissed the top of her head. Yeah, let's do that. Later, as he watched her sleep, Victor opened his laptop. A new email waited. Subject line: Preliminary internal findings. It was from the board. He read the first line, then leaned back slowly. Investigation confirmed misconduct in access and data security policy. Pending announcement and employee action. Victor exhaled, chest tight with something like relief but not yet peace. He closed the laptop. The storm wasn't over, but the winds had shifted. And this time, they were finally blowing in his direction. The company's official statement dropped at 9:12 a.m. on a crisp Monday morning. Victor sat in his car, engine idling in the parking lot of Mia's school, watching the email alert pop up on his screen. The subject line was sterile, corporate, clarification regarding recent internal matters. But the content cut through months of silence. Following a comprehensive review, we have identified a breach in our data access protocols involving a junior employee. Disciplinary action has been initiated. We acknowledge that a premature judgment was made regarding Mr. Victor Harris. Effective immediately, Mr. Harris is reinstated with full privileges and company support. No apology, no name. But it was therein black and white validation that he wasn't the villain in the story they tried to write. He stared at the words for a long moment, then looked in the rearview mirror. Mia stood in line with her backpack, waving at him with a grin too big for her tiny face. She had no idea what battles had been fought just to ensure she could keep seeing that look on his face, that steady, confident expression of a father who had not fallen. Amanda called 2 minutes later. They moved fast, she said, faster than I expected. They were scared, Victor replied. The board knows the narrative was getting out of their hands. It's not over yet. You saw the last paragraph? He nodded. They're launching a new internal equity and ethics task force. Damage control dressed up like reform, Amanda said dryly. You going in today? No, Victor said. Not yet. Want to celebrate? She asked. Dinner's on me. I know a Cuban place that can knock your soul straight. He smiled. Tempting. But tonight's for Mia. Amanda's voice softened. You earned it. Just don't let this make you smaller. I won't, he said. I'm not hiding anymore. Later that morning, Victor walked into the barber shop 2 blocks from his house. Mr. Lionel, the owner, had been cutting his hair since he was 12. As soon as Victor stepped in, heads turned. A few nodded. Others just stared. Lionel stepped from behind his chair, wiping his hands on a towel. You good, son? Getting there, Victor said. Saw the company email, Lionel muttered. Ain't say your name, but everyone here knows what it means. They tried to bury me, Victor replied. Didn't dig deep enough. That's the thing about truth, Lionel said, ushering him into the chair. It floats, even when folks want it drowned. Victor let out a breath, shoulders finally relaxing as the familiar buzz of clippers filled the space. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to be still. By the afternoon, whispers had turned into conversations. A junior developer messaged him privately. Saw what happened. Glad you didn't stay silent. An HR assistant sent a 1-line email. Some of us knew. We just didn't know how to say it. He didn't respond to all of them, but he read every word, because every sentence, every hesitant apology or quiet thank you was a stitch in a wound that had threatened to split him apart. That evening, Victor picked Mia up early. They stopped at her favorite diner on the edge of town, the kind of place where pancakes came with whipped cream eyes and bacon smiles. As they sat in their booth, she looked at him across her chocolate milkshake. Did they say sorry? She asked. Not really, he said. But they admitted they were wrong. She nodded solemnly. That's better than nothing. He smiled. You're getting wise too early. I have to, she replied, chewing her straw. I want to grow up brave. Victor reached across the table and squeezed her hand. You already are. When they returned home, the house was quiet. The kind of quiet that didn't press down but lifted. Victor poured a drink, sat at the kitchen table, and opened his laptop. A new message awaited this one from an unfamiliar sender. Subject, you need to know this. He opened it. A single attachment. An audio file. He clicked play. Ken Mallory's voice filtered through the speakers. We'll keep him suspended. Long enough to blow over. Rose is the real asset. She's hungry. She plays the game. Another voicemail, not yet identified, responded. Victor's clean, we both know that. Doesn't matter. He's too much, too seen, too respected. That's a risk. The file ended. Victor sat back slowly, his breath stilled. So it wasn't just convenience, it was strategy, a systemic decision. He forwarded the file to Amanda with a single line, "We go wider." She called immediately. "You ready for the next fight?" "This one's not for my name," he said. "It's for everyone else who never got theirs back." Outside, the wind had picked up, trees swayed against the indigo sky. But inside, Victor felt grounded. For the first time in years, he wasn't looking over his shoulder. He was looking ahead, and he wasn't walking alone anymore. Amanda's office smelled faintly of cinnamon and old paper as Victor stepped inside, his fingers wrapped tightly around a printed transcript of the audio file. The words still rang in his ears, Ken Mallory's voice so smug, so calculated, as if what he orchestrated had been nothing more than a business maneuver. Amanda was already at her desk, scrolling through a news aggregator on her tablet, her brow furrowed. Without looking up, she said, "They're prepping a company-wide town hall. Damage control, most likely. Corporate theater dressed as contrition." Victor dropped the transcript onto her desk. "We can't let them walk away from this with a few shuffled policies and a shiny new PR campaign. That file proves intent. This wasn't just about protecting assets. They targeted me because I was visible, because I didn't fit their mold." Amanda finally looked up. "Then we expose the mold." She tapped her tablet and turned it to face him. "There's a civil rights podcast called The Balance. Independent, widely respected, and their next episode is focused on workplace retaliation. I've already pitched your story. They're interested." Victor hesitated, then nodded. "It's time the story was told without edits. Unfiltered," Amanda said. "And on your terms." "Oh." Later that afternoon, Victor sat in a small recording studio downtown, headphones over his ears, the mic close enough to feel the hum of his breath bounce back at him. The host, a calm-voiced woman named Celine, opened the segment with quiet reverence. "Today's guest is Victor Harissa Father, a veteran, a man who was almost erased by whispers. What happened to him wasn't just about workplace politics, it was about power, and what happens when you stand up to it." Victor's voice didn't shake. He told everything: the ride home, the accusation, the meetings, the silence. He played the audio file. He recited parts of the company's statement. He named what no one else wanted to, that the system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as it was designed to protect its own. "The first thing they do," he said into the mic, "is make you question yourself. Then they make everyone else question you. And when you're finally too quiet to defend yourself, they fill the silence with a version that fits them better." When the interview ended, Celine leaned over the console. "That was powerful. Expect calls. Emails. Maybe some attacks. Let them come," Victor said again, the phrase now worn into his bones like a scar he no longer hid. Within 48 hours, the episode had been downloaded over 60,000 times. Comments flooded in, some in support, some skeptical, but most resonating with one truth. People knew the feeling of being silenced, knew the hollow echo of a lie louder than their truth. Amanda called, voice tight with something between urgency and satisfaction. "The board wants another meeting. They're concerned about the audio leak." "Good," Victor said. "Let them be concerned. For once, they're not in control of the narrative." "They want it private," she added. "No recordings, no advisors, just you." "Not happening." "That's what I told them. You're not a token anymore. You're a voice. And voices don't fit in closed rooms." That evening, Victor returned home to find an envelope tucked into his mailbox. No stamp, no return address. Inside, a printed photograph, the same one Rose had shown in that first HR meeting. But this time, the metadata was attached. Victor flipped the page over. The photo had been taken not at 3:21 a.m., but nearly an hour earlier at 2:29 a.m., and the timestamp didn't match her building's internal camera records, meaning the photo wasn't spontaneous. It had been staged. He sent it to Amanda immediately. Her reply came in seconds. "Game changer." The next day, the town hall commenced. Victor didn't attend in person. He watched the live stream from his laptop at home, Mia playing with Lego blocks at his feet. The CEO appeared on screen, flanked by HR and legal. He spoke about accountability, about new oversight, about culture audits and listening sessions, but not once did he say Victor's name. Not once did he acknowledge the wound. Just policies, processes, plans. Victor closed the laptop mid-speech. That night, he stood in his backyard, staring up at a sky too wide for his thoughts. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and coming rain. Mia padded outside in her socks and hugged him around the waist. "It's okay now, right, Daddy?" He rested his hand on her head. "It's better, but not done. Will it be done soon?" "Not soon," he said, "but we're not quiet anymore. That's how it begins." His phone buzzed again. A message from a former coworker, someone he'd never expected to hear from. They did the same thing to Daniel in 2019. Different story, same silence. He quit before it could get ugly. "I'm sorry I didn't speak sooner." Victor typed back, "It's not too late." He knew now that his story wasn't singular. It was systemic. But for once, he wasn't buried under it. He was standing on top of ITRA, building something with every word, every truth, every voice that finally dared to speak. The meeting with the investigative committee was scheduled for Thursday morning, 10 a.m. sharp. This time, it wasn't HR or board directors hiding behind polite phrases and legal vagueness. It was an independent ethics panel hired in haste after the podcast episode ignited public scrutiny. The company wanted credibility, so they brought in outsiders. Victor arrived early, wearing a charcoal suit, crisp white shirt, and a quiet calm that masked the fire beneath. Amanda walked beside him, her briefcase packed with evidence files, logs, timelines, audio transcripts, the photograph with the altered timestamp. They entered a room far removed from the polished boardroom, simple, undecorated, with 3 panelists seated at the front. One of them, a black woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a scholar's stillness, nodded when Victor entered. Her nameplate read, Dr. Evelyn Rohn. She didn't smile, but something about her presence steadied him. After introductions, Dr. Rohn opened. "Mr. Harris, we understand this has been a complicated ordeal. We're not here to rehash company policy. We're here to understand what happened, why it was allowed to happen, and what needs to change so it doesn't happen again." Victor met her gaze. "Then we should talk about silence." He recounted everything, methodically, without embellishment. The offer to drive Rose home, the falsified timeline, the staged photo, the frozen access, the private conversations recorded out of necessity. Amanda followed with the supporting documents, laying them out like courtroom evidence. She showed the metadata inconsistencies, the Slack messages, the VPN trace to Tarnex systems. She ended with a printed transcript of Ken Mallory's voice. "He's too seen, too respected. That's a risk." The panel sat in heavy silence. Then Dr. Rohn asked the question Victor had been waiting for. "Why do you think they chose you?" Victor didn't hesitate. "Because I've made myself visible, not loud but reliable, respected. Because I sit in rooms they don't expect people like me to sit in. Because I'm a single black man who mentors younger hires, leads a veterans outreach group, and still remembers how many times I've had to prove my worth twice over. They didn't choose me because I was easy to take down. They chose me because if they could take me down, no one else would try to rise." Rohn wrote something in her notebook, then looked up. "And what do you want from this?" "Truth," Victor replied. "For my daughter to grow up knowing the truth doesn't always stay buried just because someone powerful wants it that way." That night, he didn't go straight home. Instead, he drove to an old community center on the west side, the one where he first met Amanda years ago, back when she was fresh out of law school and still full of fire. There was a town hall there now. Not corporate, not broadcast, just chairs, folding tables, and people workers, parents, veterans, students talking about justice, equity, and the long, slow fight for dignity. Victor didn't speak at first. He listened. He heard stories too similar to his own, jobs lost, reputations stained, futures stalled. Eventually someone asked, "What do you do when they don't believe you?" Victor stood slowly. "You keep telling it. Every time someone lies louder, you tell your truth again. You document, you build community. And when the time comes, you speak not just for yourself, but for everyone who couldn't." They clapped. Not for him, for what he'd lived through, what they all had, for survival, for voice. Later, Amanda found him outside by the vending machine, sipping bad coffee. "You're building something here," she said. "Maybe," he replied. Or maybe I'm just pulling back the curtain. Either way, she said, they're watching. He looked at her, eyes tired but clear. Let them. Maybe this time, they'll see something worth changing. The next morning, Victor received another message, this time from a senior leader in compliance. We'd like you to join the Ethics Reform Committee. Full transparency, advisory capacity, your voice is needed. He stared at the message for a long time, then typed, only if I can bring others with me. The ones no one invited last time. The reply came quick. Agreed. Victor closed the message and looked out the window. The skyline of Atlanta stretched before him, sunlight warming glass and steel. Below it all, people moved, some struggling, some surviving, some still unheard. But not for long, not if he had anything to do with it, not anymore. Victor walked through the wide glass doors of the headquarters for the first time in nearly 2 months, but everything felt different. Not just because he had been publicly reinstated, not because people now nodded respectfully instead of whispering behind his back, but because he was no longer walking in as just another employee. Today, he walked in as a man who had shifted the current. His access badge beeped green, the turnstile clicked open, and as he stepped into the main floor, a few co-workers looked up from their desks. Some offered quick smiles, others the kind of glance that said, I see you now, for real. He returned each one with a small nod and kept moving. Upstairs, the newly formed Ethics Reform Committee met in what used to be the executive lounge. A symbolic choice, Amanda had said, because power should never be too far from accountability. Around the table sat 6 members, 3 internal staff, 2 external consultants, and Victor. At his insistence, one chair had been reserved for community observer, someone outside the company, rotating monthly. The first was a retired civil rights educator who now ran a mentorship program for young black professionals. The man introduced himself simply as Mr. Jordan, and his presence anchored the room. The meeting began with a review of the new policy drafts, clearer pathways for reporting misconduct, anonymous auditing systems, required cultural humility training for executives. It was progress, but Victor didn't let that soothe him. Progress wasn't the same as justice, it was merely the beginning. When it was his turn to speak, he stood rather than sit. We've talked a lot about mechanisms, he said, but let's not forget memory. This company has a memory problem, not just in how it keeps records, but in how it chooses what to forget. People remember who got promoted, but not who was passed over. They remember numbers, not names. Until that changes, all of this is just window dressing. A few heads nodded. One executive shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. Victor looked directly at her. Change means naming what went wrong, not just adjusting process. I don't want a more efficient machine. I want a more human one. After the meeting, as people filtered out, Mr. Jordan lingered. You remind me of someone, he said. Young, determined, didn't wait for permission to speak. Victor smiled. Was that a compliment? That was history, Jordan replied. You're adding to it now. Is wool. Later that day, Victor returned to his desk not to work, but to clear it out. He had decided not to resume his former role, not because they forced him out, but because he knew his purpose had shifted. His desk drawer held a few personal items, a photo of Mia in her Halloween bee costume, an old pocket notebook filled with quotes and thoughts he jotted during breaks, and a small bronze compass his father gave him before deployment. He held it in his palm for a while, watching the needle spin before finding north. A reminder that no matter how disoriented the world became, there was always a direction forward. By mid-afternoon, he had packed everything into a small box. As he headed toward the elevator, he passed Rose's old desk, empty now, cleared days ago when her termination was finalized. No nameplate, no trace, just silence. He didn't stop. He had no need to. Let the ghosts linger. He had a daughter to raise and a future to build. At home, Mia greeted him with a running hug. Did they listen to you today? She asked. They did, he said, setting the box down, and I didn't have to yell. She smiled, eyes bright. That's 'cause you speak like the truth. He laughed and kissed the top of her head. You keep saying smart things like that, I'll have to start quoting you. That evening, Amanda joined them for dinner. It was spaghetti night, which Mia insisted on helping with, though most of her effort ended up on the floor or on her apron. Still, the kitchen buzzed with warmth and clumsy joy. After the dishes were done, and Mia was in bed with her usual 3 bedtime stories, Amanda and Victor sat on the porch, wine glasses in hand, watching dusk settle over the neighborhood. "You know," Amanda said, "you could take this momentum and do something bigger. Not just reform committees. Something lasting." Victor looked at her, eyebrows raised. "What are you thinking? A nonprofit. Something focused on workplace justice, story amplification, legal aid, internal truth, telling. Call it what you want, but there are so many people like you out there, Victor, except they didn't have a mic, or a lawyer, or a community. You could be the one to build that." He thought about it. The idea felt heavy and natural all at once, like a coat that had always fit but he hadn't yet tried on. "I'll need help," he said. "You'll have it," she replied. "Just say when." He leaned back, eyes tracing the stars just starting to appear. "It started with a lie," he said. "Now it could become a lighthouse." Amanda raised her glass. "To the ones who refuse to disappear." Victor touched his glass to hers. The clink echoed into the night, soft and sharp like a bell calling something home, and for the first time in months, Victor allowed himself to believe not just that things could be different, but that he could be the one to make them so. The launch came faster than Victor expected. Within 6 weeks of his final ethics committee meeting, the nonprofit had a name, a board, a website, and a mission statement that pulsed with lived truth. Justice doesn't knock, it builds. Amanda helped him draft the charter, while former colleagues and community allies signed on as advisory members. They called it the Verity Project, and from day one, it struck a nerve. Donations trickled in, then poured. People who'd never met Victor sent messages about losing jobs after false reports, about speaking up too late or staying silent too long. Some just wrote, "Thank you for not shutting up." Every story added a layer to what he was building. By the time the Verity Project held its first forum hosted in a modest downtown library, auditorium, the seats were full. Not with activists or press, but with janitors, line managers, night nurses, retail clerks. People who knew exactly what it felt like to be disbelieved at work, to be judged before being heard. Victor stood behind the podium in a simple gray sweater and jeans, no stage lights, no teleprompter, just his voice, and the one story that had made all the others possible. "They didn't want my truth," he told them. "They wanted me quiet. And if you're in this room, you've been asked to be quiet to weather through intimidation, shame, or silence wrapped in fake smiles. I'm not here to speak for you. I'm here to say, I believe you." The room didn't erupt. It didn't need to. The power was in the hush, the way people leaned forward and nodded like exhaling for the first time in months. After the forum, a woman in her 50s approached him with tear-lined eyes. She worked for a shipping company, falsely accused of inventory theft by a supervisor who'd targeted her since her promotion. She'd spent her savings defending herself. Her case was still pending. "I thought I was crazy," she whispered. Victor handed her a Verity Project contact card. "You're not, and you won't fight alone." On the ride home, he watched the lights of Atlanta shimmer in the night and felt something shift, not just in him but in the air, the city, the conversation. The truth had found its voice, and it was multiplying. At home, Mia was asleep, curled into a nest of blankets, her lamp still on. Victor turned it off gently, kissed her forehead, and sat in the hallway with a notebook in hand. He didn't write strategy. He wrote names, not of people who wronged him, but those who had stayed. Amanda, Mr. Jordan. The HR assistant who later confessed she knew the photo felt wrong but had been afraid to speak. Lionel from the barbershop, who posted about him on the neighborhood bulletin board. The janitor who simply nodded each time they passed in the hallway, as if to say, "Still here." The next morning a reporter called, national outlet. They wanted to profile the Verity Project. Victor agreed, but only on one condition. "It's not about me," he said. "It's about what we're building." They ran the story under the headline, "The Man Who Refused to Disappear." That afternoon, the company finally did what it should have done months ago. A formal letter, signed by the CEO, delivered to Victor's email and mailbox. "We apologize for the failures in our process, for the assumptions, for the harm." It was concise, plain, but this time it used his name, and that made all the difference. Victor showed Mia that evening. She read it, frowning slightly. "Took them long enough. You're not wrong. he said, laughing. "But it matters." She looked up at him. "Can I write something back?" He handed her a pen. She scribbled in big, uneven letters. "My dad is the best, and he tells the truth, and you should listen to him." He taped it above his desk. By the end of the month, Verity had partnered with 2 law firms and a local mental health collective. They launched a new hotline for workers facing retaliation. The first call came from a grocery store employee accused of inappropriate behavior after reporting a safety issue. Amanda took the call herself. Victor watched her work and realized something he hadn't said aloud. "You ever think we're building something that's not just response but resistance?" She paused, smiled. "Every time we pick up the phone." And then came the letter from the Department of Labora, request for consultation. They'd been tracking Verity's growth. They wanted insight into the workplace bias models the team had drafted. Victor stared at the envelope for a long time. A year ago, he was nearly erased by an accusation. Now, the system that almost buried him was asking for his help. He didn't feel vindicated. He felt steady, like a man who had been through the fire and instead of burning, learned how to carry the heat. That night, standing on his porch with a quiet breeze brushing past, Victor closed his eyes and let it wash over him. He didn't know what would come next, but he knew he wouldn't walk it alone. And wherever it led, he'd walk it in his own name, on his own terms, with truth lighting the way forward. Victor sat across from the Department of Labor panel 3 weeks later in Washington, D.C., wearing the same suit he'd worn during his reinstatement, hearing the one Mia called his armor suit. But this time, he wasn't defending himself. He was there to speak as a consultant, a witness, and most importantly, a builder of something new. The panel consisted of 5 officials, each from different departments: equity, labor standards, compliance, workplace conduct, and civil rights. They were cordial but serious, their questions deliberate. One woman, Deputy Director Ellen Swanson, had followed his podcast interview and opened with a simple but loaded question. "Mr. Harris, if we gave you the pen, what would you write into the system to prevent the next Victor Harris from being targeted?" Victor didn't blink. 3 things, he said. Accountability without anonymity, transparency without retaliation, and memory that doesn't disappear when someone leaves the building. They asked him to elaborate. He spoke not just from his story, but from the 237 cases the Verity Project had reviewed since its inception, cases of workers like him, accused without due process, pushed out quietly, or worn down until they resigned without a fight. He explained how fear operated in fluorescent-lit offices the same way it did in the streets. It silenced, it erased, and it justified itself with policy language wrapped in professionalism. "We have grievance procedures that sound fair but are run by people with incentives to preserve hierarchy," he said. "We have diversity slogans painted on office walls, but no accountability when marginalized voices are ignored. The culture pretends to care, but only until caring gets expensive." The room was still, not out of discomfort, but recognition. These weren't revelations. They were confirmations of what many suspected but hadn't yet heard, said with clarity and lived weight. Afterward, one of the compliance analysts approached him in the hallway, quietly. "I remember when your case hit internal boards. I didn't say anything. I just watched it unfold. I wanted to reach out. I didn't." Victor didn't judge. He simply replied, "You can still choose to speak now." That night, back in his hotel room, Victor sat at the desk and opened his laptop. The inbox was full again, workers from across the country writing to the Verity Project. A janitor in Des Moines retaliated against for reporting unsafe conditions. A nurse in Detroit accused of neglect after filing a harassment report. A bus driver in Oakland suspended after speaking up about overtime abuse. He read every one, not out of obligation but out of reverence. Each was a seed, a signal, a piece of the chorus that was growing louder every day. He replied to as many as he could before midnight, then closed the laptop and leaned back, letting the weight of it settle into his spine. The next morning, Amanda called with news that pulled him upright. Ken Mallory's deposition just went public. Someone leaked it to the press. "What did he say?" Victor asked. "That he authorized the data access, that he and Rose coordinated it, and that targeting you was strategic. He even admitted the phrase you recorded, 'too seen, too respected,' was exactly how he felt." Victor stared out the window at the skyline beyond the Capitol. So now they know. Now everyone knows, Amanda said. And guess what else? Tarnex Systems just issued a statement denying involvement, but internal emails show they received the stolen data. They're exposed, too. Will there be charges? That's up to the feds. But reputationally, they're toast. That afternoon, Victor received a call from Ellis Grant, the CEO who once issued a statement without saying his name. Grant's voice was polite, subdued, like a man who understood he'd been caught in the mirror of his own silence. "Victor, I'd like to invite you back for a keynote at our company's annual summit. It's time we heard directly from the people we failed." There was a pause. Victor didn't answer right away. Then, "I'll speak, but not for your image, for your employees. For the ones still afraid to speak." "Understood," Grant replied. "You'll be compensated. Donate it to a legal defense fund," Victor said, and ended the call. The summit was held in a grand ballroom, chandeliers glinting over perfectly laid tables and meticulously timed schedules. Victor walked to the podium in front of hundreds of employees, executives, press, and invited guests. He didn't prepare a speech. He didn't need to. "When I was first brought into HR," he began, "I thought the worst thing they could take was my job. I was wrong. They tried to take my voice, my dignity, my story. But I'm standing here because I refused to let them." The room was silent, eyes locked, hearts slowed. He went on to name the people they forgot: Daniel, the developer who left in 2019, the warehouse team member suspended without cause, the HR assistant who quietly collected screenshots and gave them to Amanda. They weren't failures of procedure, he said. They were failures of courage. When he ended, the applause wasn't loud, it was long, sustained, like people had needed a reason to exhale. Backstage, as he collected his notes and prepared to leave, a young woman approached. She wore a staff badge and looked barely out of college. "Mr. Harris," she said quietly, "I was Rose's intern before she left. She told me once that if she couldn't move up by playing fair, she'd play smart." Victor looked at her. "Did you report it?" She shook her head. "I was afraid." He didn't scold her, just nodded. "Next time, don't be." She nodded back. That night, Victor returned home to Mia, who had taped a sign to the front door. "Welcome home, Justice Man." He laughed, scooped her up, and whispered, "Almost there." But he knew the truth. Justice wasn't a destination, it was a path, and he was walking it step by step, story by story, never again alone. 2 weeks after the summit, Victor found himself sitting on the floor of Mia's room, a half-finished jigsaw puzzle spread between them. The corner pieces were easy. The middle still confused her. "Why do the ones with no picture take the longest?" she asked, furrowing her brow. He smiled. "Because they're the ones that hold everything together. You can't see what they are yet, but you need them to finish the picture." She nodded, satisfied with that, and went back to fitting blue and gray shards of sky into place. That same day, the Verity Project received its first grant, a substantial one, from a coalition of workplace reform advocates who had followed Victor's story from the start. Amanda called, practically breathless. "This changes everything," she said. "We can expand, hire a real staff, create a legal arm, maybe even offer direct defense." Victor didn't respond right away. He looked at the puzzle in front of him, then out the window where the light was fading. "I want to go national," he said. "Not just online. I want people to feel us in their cities, not just read about us on a screen." "Then we start planning," she said. "We already have momentum. Let's build structure." The next month moved fast. Victor was invited to speak at 3 universities, 2 corporate retreats, and 1 public policy symposium in Boston. Each time, he adjusted his tone for the room, but the message never changed. Truth needs protectors, not just believers. People listened. Some cried. A few left, uncomfortable. But no one left untouched. On one particularly rainy morning, he returned from a red-eye flight to find an envelope on his doorstep. Inside, a short handwritten letter. "I was on the ethics panel. I never told you, but I was one of the ones who didn't believe you at first. Not because I thought you were guilty, but because it was easier not to know. I was tired of fighting systems that don't bend. You reminded me why it's worth trying again. No signature, just an old university crest embossed in the corner." Victor folded the letter, tucked it into his journal, and wrote above it, Remember this when it gets hard again, and it would, because despite the wins, the resistance was real. Trolls flooded their forums with attacks. A political commentator called the Verity Project a pity pipeline for corporate underachievers. One news host mocked Victor's keynote, calling it emotional theater for woke HR. Victor read the headlines but didn't carry them. The people they helped, that's what he carried. One case that hit him hardest was Marcia Tillman, a former retail manager in Alabama, wrongfully fired after filing a wage theft report. Single mother of 2, couldn't afford a lawyer. The Verity Project gave her one. 3 weeks later, the store settled, paid restitution, and rewrote their internal oversight policy. She called Victor crying, not for justice, but because for the first time in years, she said, she felt like someone believed her before asking for proof. It's like being told you matter, she said, without having to scream it. Then came the invitation from Capitol Hill, a roundtable discussion with congressional aides on proposed legislation addressing workplace retaliation protections. Amanda called with the details. You'd be speaking alongside economists, attorneys, and HR executives. They want real-world perspective. Victor didn't hesitate. Booked the flight. He wore a navy blazer, no tie, and spoke into the microphone with the same even cadence he'd used in podcast studios and library basements. I'm not here to sell pain, he said. I'm here to talk about its aftermath, about what happens when we don't believe people quickly enough, when we let systems protect the wrong things. The aides took notes, some nodded. One older gentleman with wire-rimmed glasses looked visibly uncomfortable. Victor didn't soften. Every time we ask a victim to wait for an investigation while we protect the accused's career, we send a message. That message says, "Your truth is inconvenient. Please whisper it later." I'm here to end the whispering. The room fell silent when he finished. One aide, a young black woman, approached him as he gathered his notes. I interned for the very company that suspended you, she said quietly. Your story changed how I see everything. He looked at her and said the only thing that mattered. Then we're already winning. That night, Victor flew home, exhausted but resolute. Mia was still awake when he walked in, curled on the couch with a book too big for her age. She jumped into his arms. Were you brave again today? He nodded, holding her close. Always. She looked up, eyes shining. Then I'll be brave tomorrow. Victor lay in bed later, sleep reluctant, mind whirring. He thought of the journey from the HR office where everything unraveled to the podiums where his voice now carried. He thought of the ones still waiting, still unheard, and he knew tomorrow wasn't a resting place. It was the next step, because justice wasn't a courtroom win or a corporate apology. It was 1,000 small shifts, 1,000 stories brought into the light. And he was still walking, still listening, still building. A year to the day since Victor sat in that conference room being accused of something he didn't do, he stood in front of a different crowd this time, not to defend, but to celebrate. The Verity Project was hosting its first national summit, drawing in advocates, whistleblowers, legal experts, and survivors from 23 states. The venue was a repurposed civic center in Atlanta's West End. Nothing flashy, just functional folding chairs, handmade banners, volunteer name tags scrawled in Sharpie. But the energy in the room vibrated with something far more powerful than polish, presence, stories, proof of what could happen when truth was given space to breathe. Victor walked quietly through the crowd before taking the stage, greeting people like old friends. There was Marcia, the former retail manager from Alabama, now a volunteer coordinator. There was Jordan, the retired civil rights educator, leading a breakout workshop on bystander courage. Amanda was everywhere organizing, coaching, nodding at people like she was passing them invisible armor. Victor took the stage without introduction. He didn't need one. The crowd stilled, leaning into him with the kind of attention people give only to those who've earned it through fire. A year ago, he began, I was told to be quiet, that protecting the institution was more important than protecting the person, that I should step aside, let the process work, wait for a system that already decided who I was before I said a word. But I didn't step aside, and neither did you. He scanned the room, eyes landing on faces that weren't strangers anymore. We built something here, not just policy, not just awareness. We built a kind of defiance that doesn't scream, but doesn't yield. You all taught me that justice isn't an event, it's a daily decision, and you keep making it." He didn't read from a paper, he didn't need a script. He was speaking from somewhere deeper than memory, from the marrow of experience. "When I stood in that HR office," he said, "I was alone. But when I stood in truth, I wasn't." And that's what this movement is about, reminding each other that we're never truly alone if we're willing to stand. The applause wasn't thunderous. It was warm, steady, like rain that nourishes instead of erodes. After the summit, Victor returned home to find Mia waiting on the porch with a plate of cookies and a wide grin. "You were on television again," she said proudly. "They said you're making rules." He laughed, sitting beside her. "I'm helping rewrite the ones that got it wrong." She leaned into him. "Then maybe one day I'll make rules too." "You already are," he said. That night, after she fell asleep with cookie crumbs on her cheek and a superhero book open on her chest, Victor sat at his desk writing letters. One was to his former supervisor, Ellis Grant, not out of revenge, but release. He wrote, "I don't need another apology. I need you to remember. Because the next time someone walks into your office with a story that doesn't fit your comfort, I want you to sit still and listen, not for compliance, for conscience." He mailed it the next morning, not because he expected a reply, but because he'd learned that speaking truth wasn't always about outcome, it was about ownership. As autumn crept into the city, Victor received an invitation to speak at a National Justice Forum, keynote slot, prime time. The theme, the architecture of repair. He accepted, but before he flew out, he visited his mother's grave. He stood in silence for a while, then spoke as if she were still listening. "I kept my name, Mama. They tried to take it, but I held on, and now it means something more." He placed a single white rose on the stone, then walked away, not with finality but with forward motion. At the forum, Victor spoke last. The lights were brighter, the audience bigger, but the message was still rooted in the same soil. "They say justice is blind," he told the crowd, "but I've learned it's not. It sees exactly what it wants to see until we force it to see differently, and that forcing isn't loud. It's steady, it's persistent, it's inconvenient, but most of all it's brave." After the speech, a young man approached him. First job out of college, quiet voice, said he'd almost quit after reporting misconduct and being sidelined. But then he heard Victor's story. "I stayed," he said, "because if you didn't leave, maybe I didn't have to either." Victor shook his hand. "Then the work is working." And that night, flying home, Victor looked out the plane window at the scattering of city lights far below, each one a reminder of someone trying, someone standing, someone refusing to be erased. He thought of Mia asleep in her bed, of Amanda reviewing another intake report, of the woman from the summit who stood trembling at the mic to tell her truth for the first time. This was the shape of justice now. Not perfect, not complete, but alive. And he would keep walking it as a father, as a founder, as a man who refused to disappear because the picture was still unfinished, and he had more corner pieces to place.